A typical review of this game would start by lamenting, "Oh woe, how Sonic the Hedgehog has languished in the dark depths of poor quality mire. But lo and behold, for our savior Freedom Planet has arrived to remind us mere mortals how good those 2D Sonic experiences were, even exceeding its canonized sensei." First of all, I've never played any 2D Sonic games, so I have no frame of reference. Secondly, many of those reviews were written before Sonic Mania was a thing. And thirdly, every artist has their creative dry seasons, get over it. Now that I've established that I'm able to review this game purely on its own merits, let's see what's made this 2014 speed platformer such an indie darling.
This is the first creative leading video game project from its writer/programmer Sabrina, back then Stephen Diduro, also known under the pseudonym Strife, whose other video game contributions include art for something called That Really Hot Chick and producing for Crabble for Shrina and Petalgrass. People comparing this game to Sonic aren't too far off because it started its life as a Sonic fan game, though apparently with original characters, so it would have been a fan game and not a fan game at the same time. The developers probably realized that at that point it's smarter to just do your own thing.
Ms. Didoro has however clarified that Sonic isn't this game's only source of inspiration, as it borrows its mechanics from many other 16-bit classics I've never played, like Ristar for example, and is meant to be a general homage to the 4th console generation aesthetic, even though it is more closer to 32-bit in this case. Yeah, I'd like to see Sega Mega Drive try to run this thing.
The story certainly starts with a bang as the city of Shui Gang on the planet of Avalis gets attacked by a ruthless intergalactic conqueror Lord Brevon, played with gravely gusto by Xander Barriga, who had earlier crash landed on the planet not named Freedom. He confronts the city's king, played by never mind then. What was this game's age rating again? Becky 12 includes violence. Oh, you don't say! Well, the now new King Dial, played by Sun Ziplock, gets brainwashed and declares war for a neighboring city kingdom, though that's shown in a much later cutscene. Long before that we see another spaceship crashing, which is noticed by our main character, Water Dragon Lilac, played by Dawn Michelle Bennett, and her feline sidekick Carol, played by Amanda Lott, and are always eager to help heroine is on the case. However, weaving that or any other exchange isn't necessary if you choose the classic mode that is reminiscing to those times when you had to read the game's story from its manual. In fact, cutscenes were merely a stretch goal for this game's successful Kickstarter campaign.
Boy, did people complain about the narrative aspect. I'm not, however, preaching with that core. I think that the dialogue that can be quote-unquote cringe is stylized this way on purpose in order to simulate the Saturday morning cartoon vibe. So, trashing this game completely based on that is that hypocritical in my opinion, especially from Sonic fans. I mean, have you watched any cutscene from Sonic Adventure games recently? But I do, however, agree that the story's pacing is terrible.
Hey, Lilac. How come George doesn't want to hang out with us?
He said he had some work to do.
He's probably just scared of getting cooties. Cooties!
What was the point of that exchange? Maybe if the cutscenes would have been part of the core design from the start, they would have been more evenly spread out through the levels. But when you put a bunch of them in a row after a high adrenaline action sequence, especially if there's some pointless fluff like that previous scene, it can get quite annoying when you have to wait for up to 12 minutes for the next ass-kicking part.
In the plot proper, Lilac finds the shipwrecky Torque, played by Patrick Seymour, who is pestered by Brevon's second-in-command Serpentine, played by Jason Lord, certainly one of the more over-the-top performances, but in a tone-fitting way. Oh, and our heroes are also joined by a wild child Mila, played by Amy Smith, who, despite being the third player character, doesn't have that much plot relevance now that I think of it. But yeah, the story continues from there with Torque being revealed to be an extraterrestrial hunting for Brevin, who intends to steal the mystical Kingdom Stone in order to fuel his army and ship, not giving a damn if his actions cause an international conflict as a side product. Damn, this guy is ruthless. The plot is another point of debate among reviewers, some calling it predictable, and I suppose it is to an extent, but it's alright enough. Once again, it has that stylized Saturday morning cartoon vibe of some fun action, but also some actual danger to keep younger audience on their seats, so I don't think Lord Breven's antics cause too big of a total sin.
Same for the characters as well. They are likable, at least those who are meant to be, and their voice deliveries, while not always landing, have some bright spots, especially for Miss Bennett in her breakthrough role as Lilac, whose compassion and sometimes to a false steadfastness for heroism make her a compelling lead.
This is so much bigger than us. We're just kids.
That doesn't mean anything.
Doesn't mean anything? Look at what they did to me! To us! Sometimes I feel like you're trying to get us killed.
How can you say that? I put myself out there on the front line so you don't have to!
What all critics seem to agree on it is audiovisual mastery. Level layouts are vividly bright, sprites are expressive, and the action cartoon electro soundtrack gets me pumped up! Well, sometimes the multi-layered call scheme can cause problems with the semi-maze-like level design where it's not always clear what belongs to the background, like those loops that only go to one direction, but nevertheless, no complaints about audio department at least. So yeah, the gameplay consists of fast-paced platforming through 10 levels that are in Sonic fashion separated to several parts, with plenty of alternative routes and each of them having bosses and mini-bosses that can get demanding when trying to figure out their patterns during hectic onslaughts. They do get little repetitive once you nail the formula down, but at least they're flashy.
The game trusts that you are familiar with 16-bit era platformer conventions, but still the gameplay is easy to learn, yet enjoyably tough to master. Maybe sometimes it's trusted too well, because it never told what all those power-ups are supposed to do. Apparently some versions include a manual, but my good old game's copy certainly didn't have one, so I had no idea. I guess they protected me from something?
As I alluded before, Lilac isn't the only player character, but I do recommend playing the story mode with her first, because otherwise there's too much stuff happening off-screen. Carol, while having a motorcycle as a power-up, and it is hilarious when she has to carry it while hanging, is noticeably slower and clumsier because she misses Lilac's boost abilities, so she's more limited in what comes to exploration. Carol's gimmick is to do wall jumps via these red jewel platforms, which gives her some alternate routes Lilac can't reach, and as a fighter she uses more melee attacks that aren't as powerful, so essentially she's the hard difficulty. On the other hand, the third player character Milla is hard to pinpoint due to having a drastically different playstyle. Instead of relying on her weak strength, she can generate energy cubes she can shoot at enemies or protect herself with, plus she's able to do this neat hovering maneuver. I didn't complete her campaign, but from what I saw, I had the feeling that most of the levels were designed with Lilac and Carol in mind, because aside from Milla's first, they didn't seem to support her move arsenal that well.
That last part will turn out to be a problem for the game's promised Kickstarter stretch goal player characters, namely Torque and Dial's brother Spade, because apparently their playstyle would have been so different it would have completely broken the levels. Because of that, many think this game to be still on beta stage, but personally, I don't mind their exclusion. The character roster already offers enough variation in playstyles, and overall, I think that Freedom Planet is polished enough to earn its reverse status.
Understandably, the early teens demographic way its narrative is built can feel awkward to some, but the game manages to emulate the atmosphere of its 90s paragon so well that despite it making even me wince once in a while, I can respect it for the passion its creators poured into it. But as mentioned, you are free to skip those portions and enjoy tight gameplay that have its occasional hiccups with some counterintuitive level design, but overall is satisfying in its high-energy audiovisual honey bath and intense confrontations. Freedom Planet is a strong ambassador for the era it pays homage to that doesn't completely drown in its nostalgia, and I for one can't wait for the sequel that is supposed to be released this year.
From snippets I've seen here and there, the sequel is going to feature a world map, and one of the first game's mini-bosses as the fourth player character, so it seems like there's going to be much more content. Additionally, the developers haven't completely given up on the idea to include Torque and Spade in the first game. It's just that idea has been on dormancy in order to focus on the sequel's development. Though, it has been 8 years, who even cares at this point? So, I suppose it earns the developers some extra brownie points the more crowdfunding promises they're able to keep.